Imagine waking up on your homestead, powered by the sun, self-reliant. Sounds amazing, right? And then the internet pipes up with the price tag. I often have been accused of being a trust fund baby. No matter how many times I've told my story about building my frugal homestead from next to nothing, there's always new viewers that haven't seen exactly how I got here, who assume that I've got a ton of money, or that I started with a ton of money, or that I had outside income, and it's just not true. And in this video, I'm going to address these myths about the cost of off-grid living and starting a homestead. Can it be extremely expensive? Sure. There's so many ways to spend your money these days. But can it be frugal? Can you make it happen on way, way less? Could it be done on nearly an non-existent budget? Yeah, it can be done. You just have to be willing to put in the sweat equity. Today's video is sponsored by Sane Logic's weather station, and we'll talk about that briefly in a little while. If you follow along, this part might be repetitive to you because I talk about this constantly. But what I would highly recommend to anybody is to do what I did. Just use Google. Don't use one individual land search website. If you use Google or another search engine, you can search 100 of those land websites at the same time. And you can search the entire United States. Unless you find a really remote town that is unincorporated, those are the places that people find to just go build whatever they want and whatever. But I don't necessarily recommend that, There's pretty well not a place that exists that you don't need to follow some sort of rules. So instead of trying to avoid them, I would just search the entire United States to, number one, find an affordable piece of property. The reason I say this is there's possibly a woman whose husband died and they had to get rid of the farm, and she wants to get rid of this piece of property that's worth $100,000 because it just makes her sad. And she would just be really happy to get 50 for it. Or maybe somebody's got much less land that's worth 10, but they just want to get 2 out of it. And you're much more likely to find those kind of properties. And then when you find these really good deals, then you can research that county. Find out the rules for that county. And if getting septic is required, then just include that in the price of what you're going to do. Just budget for that. So can you still get land for around $1,000 an acre? You really can if you look for it. And you don't need to buy 40, 80, 300 acres of land. 1 acre is enough to sustain yourself and your family with a little garden. You might not keep horses on there necessarily to graze and whatever. You could keep horses though and just train them and ride them daily probably. An acre is a lot more land than most people think. An example, that would be like 4 lots, 4 nice, hefty residential lots, And if you've ever lived in the city and you drive by that corner lot and you're like, that guy's got a big property. Well, it's like a quarter of the size of an acre. So you can buy less land, and if you can afford to fence that land, I would say that it's in your means. If you can buy a piece of land and fence it, then you really know that it's definitely within your means. And I would recommend doing that as well. When you live in the middle of nowhere like I do, and over an hour from the nearest city, there's not good weather information available. And that's why I'm going to install the Sane Logic SA9. I used to have a nice weather station up on my water tower, just out the window there, but my water tower collapsed. And although I had it back up in a week, the old weather station was damaged. So I'm really grateful to have this actually. And today it might rain. It's definitely a good day to check humidity and barometric pressure and so forth. It might even rain a little bit. This is just a short introduction, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time showing you how to set it up, but I am going to show you the key parts and how great it works at the end here. Okay, so these are AAA, but it turns out the batteries on the machine, on the unit, are AA. So we'll go back out there. All right, with batteries, I've climbed up to the top of the water tower, which wasn't easy with the boot on my foot. And I don't have an ideal location, so it's not perfectly level, but you can see that it's pretty close. It tells you, depending on your hemisphere, which way to point it. You can sync the device by hitting the top right button on the controller here, and on the unit, hit reset, and now you can see that it's reading everything outside as well as inside. I didn't get enough rain to show any rain collected, really, but you can see throughout the day here the temperature change and the humidity change inside and outside, and it tells you just about everything you'd need to know. I'm too far from any town to rely on their weather, and so having this station is really helpful. And with their app, I can access it. So say I go to town and it starts raining and I'm not sure if I'm getting a lot of rain on the homestead, I could pull up the app and see, oh wow, it's actually really windy up there, really rainy, and it'll give me a better idea of what to expect. Here's a quick example of the discrepancy of counting on the local news. They said it was only going to be 12 miles an hour wind, when in fact it was over 24 miles an hour on the homestead. So like I said, it might rain, and I just wanted to show you, it did in fact rain, and the controller knew it. It shows here that it's in fact raining. The point is that there is still so much land all over the United States that's very much affordable. I've seen land in Florida that would be good for homesteading. I've seen land in Arkansas, New Mexico, Texas, California, Oregon, so on and so forth. There's lots and lots of places you can get land. So broaden your horizon, and also, if you're willing to buy land like I did, see, many people to this day call my land garbage land. It's just not good land. And I don't think that's true at all. I love my homestead. It's phenomenal. It serves its purpose. It fulfills my needs. I did research to see if it would fulfill my needs before I came out here. And living really remotely was good for me. And some people are going to want to live closer to the hospital and city, and you can do that. But there is a lot of affordable land out there, and if you buy land that other people think is less desirable, it'll cost a lot less money, and property tax could be next to nothing. I bought my land in 2020 for less than $2,000. I've got 2.5 acres, or about a hectare of land, which turned out to be perfect. I've got my homestead fenced on about an acre, and then I've got a pasture that is about an acre and a half for the horses to run and play on. So for about $2,000 in full, I own my land. My property tax are less than $10 a month. I had a guy comment the other day. He called me a flat out liar. And while I wouldn't just call someone a liar, especially about something I don't know, I understand where he's coming from. He's frustrated that he pays a lot for his property tax wherever he is. But it's true, if you live somewhere that's real remote on land that people don't really want, then there's just not going to be that much need for the tax in the first place. What do you pay tax for? Well, if you've got electricity ran out to your property, water lines ran out, there's paved roads and all those kind of things, that's mostly what tax is for. And so the further out you are, the less reason there is to tax somebody for those things. Okay? So just look up your county rules and find out what you have to do and then incorporate that. When I moved out here, this has been 5 years ago now. At the time, they were completely happy for people to come camp in an RV. You could live full-time in an RV. I called every department in the county and said, what about my camper van? It's an RV basically, yeah. And I talked to them, and I figured out exactly what I could do. At the time, you could do that. It sounds like now you're not really allowed to do that anymore. And so it sounds like you may need to have a septic to get started now. Well, just include that in the cost of getting started. I know that maybe that's not ideal, but complaining won't change it, and so you got to just accept it. And what I did is, at the time, I put in the the composting system that they had down there, they were showcasing it at the county. That's what they said, yeah, you can put in this composting system. It was even free. I don't know if they're allowing that anymore or whatnot, but I have a state inspected, permitted, and approved composting toilet system. And so that was a really cool option for somebody like me to get started. And you take what you can. But, you know, I don't doubt one bit that down the road, I may very well put in a septic down the road and then build a larger home, you know, and that could be a long way down the road. But at any rate, you know, that's what I did. And so it cost me about $13,000 to build my cabin here. Just a real basic box. It's a 10 by 20. It's got a loft up top there, you know. It's got a 4-foot deck all the way around, and it's got a pergola out there. I hired an engineer to help me with the design and everything. And you know, there's that. All in all, if you include all the gardens, the greenhouses, you know, the infrastructure for the shop, the round pen, the stables, the livestock, everything from the day I started, I'm at around $50,000 all in. And I know that a lot of people will be like, oh, that's so much money. But if you think about over 5 years to build an entirely functional, frugal, but functional homestead, for $50,000, it has my home, my workshop. I can raise, I raise about 400 pounds of meat every year. I've got horses and gardens, and I grow more fruit and vegetables. I eat more fruit and vegetables from my homestead now than I ever bought before. And it's great, you know, and now if you, of course you can say, wow, 50,000 is a huge amount of money, but over a 5-year, you know, span. And then when you consider like a regular old home is like $250,000 now, right? And then you would finance it and then pay 500,000 for it, or may never even pay it off in your life, you know? This is why I think it can be quite affordable actually to start a homestead. And I'll tell you the biggest zing. Okay. So if you're an adult, you know, you probably got to pay rent or mortgage, and you got to buy lots of groceries. And those are the most expensive bills anybody has. If you can get into a position where you're set up on a homestead, on a piece of land, and no longer have to pay mortgage, what are you saving? $2,000 a month? $24,000 a year? Whoa, suddenly you got that $50,000, you know? And now talk about food. I might spend a couple $100 a month on food just because I do buy a lot of stuff I don't necessarily need to. I like to have a variety of meat and just some different things. You know, vegetables that I don't even have in the garden and so on and so forth. But I do greatly offset my cost of food, and it saves me a lot of money. And I'm also not driving in and out all the time. I make 100% of my income from my homestead. You know, I've got multiple sources of income, both on the internet, off the internet, on my website, in person. You know, there's so many things you can do to generate many, many streams of income. And basically, I run a homestead all day, every day. And it's panned out really well for me. And I think most people get that. But every single day I get comments about people that think I'm a trust fund baby, or that you got to be rich to start a homestead, or, you know, it just is impossible is what a lot of people think. And I get that. I really feel like we were conditioned from the time we were little kids to adults that we're supposed to work a 9 to 5, and that's just the way it is. And if you were shaped your entire life to believe that that's the only way to live, then why would you think that it's possible to think outside of the box and start, you know, buy some land, start a homestead, and maybe generate income that way? And the cool thing about starting a homestead also is I think that everyone should go after what they're passionate about. And so if you love more than anything to play the violin, there's a way for you to make a living playing the violin. You know what I mean? Like whether the very best way to sell that is to make music for elementary kids, or if it's to play music backgrounds for movies, whatever you got to do, maybe you're playing shows, you can make a living playing the violin. And if somebody else, all they want to do is can peaches for the rest of their life, you can make a living canning peaches. And so I would give it a shot to do what you're most passionate about, because then you don't even have to sell the product because you really do love it, and so people just want to support that. And that being said, it's not for everybody to be an entrepreneur. A lot of people would prefer to live with a 9 to 5, and that's an option too. You can, just get land that's closer to a city or town, find a job that you're passionate about, and go into that, all the time. But I started my homestead. I bought the land for less than $2,000 and came out here with a camper van, a trailer, a year's supply of food, $6,000. I spent $4,000 of that on the building my shop because lumber was super through the roof in 2020, and I only had $2,000 left. And by the day that I actually finally, because I had to trademark my company, start an LLC, come up with my products, all that. By the day I started my company, I had no money. I had $0, guys, literally zero. And then I made like $30, and then $90. And it slow and steady started to make enough to get by. And it only took me, I noticed that it only cost me about $500 a month to get by because I didn't have to pay rent and mortgage. And I share all of this to help other people that are in similar situations that felt like maybe it's hopeless. Maybe you can't start a homestead. Maybe you can't see any other way to maybe live the American dream. It is possible, guys. It is possible to make a success of yourself, even if you've messed up. You can turn your life around. An example, I quit using pain pills and whatnot over 20 years ago. I quit everything else about 12 years ago, and then other than alcohol, it's been about 2 years that I've been sober from that. And that too makes a huge difference, and eating healthy makes a huge difference. I've lost 160 pounds. If you do your best every day, make a list, check it off, things will work out pretty good for you. Hey, buddy.